Hi and welcome to the OCR Review, a podcast that covers all things OCR from all around the world.
The first truly international OCR podcast. We are from the UK, living in Asia and following the US racing scene to bring you a holistic overview of what's going on in OCR globally. Cool. So hi guys and welcome to this week's episode of the OCR Review. Super excited to be joined by Spartan Pro racer Lou Guenier, who is part of the French contingent of pro racers, although he's actually based out in Southeast Asia at the moment. We met Lou a couple of years ago, or last year? I don't know, time flies. A little while ago in a gym out in Bali. He was the proud owner of, I think, his first elite trophy at that point in time. And, you know, I think we both kind of zeroed in on that and went, oh, who does this belong to? And could we be friends? So super excited to get him on the podcast today. He has some fantastic stories, which we figured we would like to share with everyone else, seeing as we enjoy listening to them so much. So hi, Lou, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Cool, we're excited to have you here. So I'm going to jump straight in and ask how you got into OCR racing in the first place. If you could maybe share with us your first race experience.
Okay, so my first OCR race was actually not a Spartan race. It was what we in French we have it. It's called Mud Day, and so it's a at the time back in 2015. It was a non-competitive only. And I was joining as part of the school I used to work at was organizing like a team building event, and so they had a lot of the staff members running that race. And I was already a racer. I was already running road races quite a little bit. I did before that like 2 trail races, but that was my first actual OCR races. And so I joined in. I loved it. I finished all the obstacles. There was no failure or no penalty because there was no competitive heat, but I loved it. And then I decided to, next time there was going to be a Spartan race or another kind of OCR race in France, I could join. I decided to join the elite. And so a couple of months later, the Spartan race in Paris happened. And so I decided to join both an elite wave and an open wave because my school was still open and we're still doing the team building event on those races. And so I decided to do a first loop as an elite. It was back then it was a Spartan Super, and I think it was about 15 kilometers. So I decided to do a first loop as the elite team. As the elite wave, and then a second in the open wave. And so I did that. I ran my first elite. At the time I had very bad equipment. Like I raced the Spartan race in a very muddy terrain with Nike Free like 5.0 or something.
Oh gosh, so good traction then.
Oh, very good traction. And I used them on the road so much that you could see from under, you could see my toes.
Oh no.
Oh.
And in a very, very muddy terrain, like the races in the UK or stuff like where you're almost knee deep in mud with those shoes was horrible. I remember there was a small hill on that race and it took me literally 5 minutes to get up because I was like running uphill and then I was sliding down on both my hands and legs and my hands and feet. And I was sliding down and I was trying to hang on to anything. And I was running up again and then sliding again. And so, yeah. But I managed to finish on that race. I managed to finish 7th.
Wow.
I only had to do burpees on the memory code because it was something like took me 5 minutes to understand how the memory code was working to remember it. And then I was like, oh, they might have forgotten it because after 10 kilometers, they didn't ask me for anything. And then I arrived 500 meters away from the end and they asked me. Like, okay, I don't remember it. And so I started doing burpees. And back then there was a guy that was like neck to neck with me. And he arrived at the same time as I did on the memory code. And he left after I was done with like 10 burpees. So not pointing fingers, but he left very quickly. He was very efficient, I suppose, on his burpees. And so anyway, I managed to finish 7th on this race. And they told me that 15 days later, the World Championship in Tahoe was happening and that I was qualified.
Wow. So basically second OCR race and you're like, brilliant, off you go to the US.
Exactly. I still, so the open wave I was supposed to join had already left. And so I joined in the next heat, and I managed to catch up with my co-workers, and I was shouting to everyone that I was qualified for the World Championship. Everyone was a little bit pissed at me because I was like passing everyone, shouting that I was, qualified for the World Championship. I was so happy. There is very little sports where you can actually say that on your second race, you actually qualify for the World Championship. And that was a huge opportunity for me.
I mean, so, I think to be going in your second race, and if the only thing you're failing is the memory test.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible. I mean, like, I know the first memory test I hit was out here in Asia rather than the UK.
Yeah.
And after I passed it, I spent the rest of the race just saying the code over and over and over again. And like, as a dyslexic, that was probably one of the hardest obstacles I've ever come across. So it's definitely a quiet animal,
but not obstacle. One that you're expecting. I think most people expect to go in and have difficulty with the physical aspect 100%. Of the obstacle. So if you're going in and just like getting through all of, like the things that you expect to be tough rather than the memory wall, and
in wrecked trainers as well. Like if you had some traction, you might have even been a little bit higher up the scale there. I remember in our first race, like you were saying, like there seems to have been a shift away from that kind of like mud race to it being an obstacle course race with Spartan at the very least.
Yeah.
But I remember in our first race, some dude had very swish trainers. I don't want to say Nikes, like I feel like we're bagging on Nikes, but I feel like they were. But he literally like went off the start line, just went straight into the mud, and his foot came out, like his bare foot, like it took his shoe and his sock off, like, and that was, and then
he was just like hopping around with all of us trying to get around him.
But that was the thing, he had kind of like swaggered his way to the front, even though it's an open wave that we were in, he like swaggered his way to the front and was like one of those dudes racing shirtless with his chest out, and it was just like that. And then obviously the whole 300 people in that wave are obviously barreling through, and he's trying to pick himself backwards through to get his trainer. Like, it's underrated. You need to have good footwear. So
the important question is, did your footwear last the whole of your second loop in the open wave?
Yeah. So it was fine. It was just no traction at all. So it was complicated. I think I threw them just after the race. It was just they're done.
What do you?
What do you see your toes under? Yeah, it's time to throw them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
what do you race in now? Do you still go for the toes poking through look, or have you changed that?
No, I've evolved from that. I hope I've grown a little bit from that. And now I race in VJ Sports. I race in IROC most of the time. But yeah, they're just amazing shoes. I've used them for about a year on races, mostly on races because I train most of the time here on roads.
Yeah.
But, so just looping back to that, talking about your running and things, you were saying that you prior to Spartan were running some trail races and things. What was your athletic background before coming into Spartan Race?
So I've before racing, I had like no particular sports. Like I wasn't on a track 5 days a week or like those stories, or I wasn't like Killian Jornet, summiting at 4 years old. I always had a childhood pretty active. I was, snowboarding, paragliding, walking in the Himalayas when I was 12 or 10 or 12, I don't remember. But, an active lifestyle, but I wasn't really focused on one sport. And then I broke my leg paragliding. And strangely enough, that's when I started racing. That's when I started running, and I registered. I was living in the mountains in France, and there was a trail nearby in the mountains. It was 32 kilometers and 1,000 meter elevation gain. And out of nowhere, with no experience in running, I was like, yeah, it's in 15 days. I'll race it. And so my first race, 32 kilometers. Before that, I had a very extensive training. I think I ran 3 times 10 kilometers, and that was the whole extent of my preparation for that trail.
So it was well prepared then, months and months of.
Well prepared, yeah, for sure. 10 kilometers on a road is definitely going to prepare you for a 32 kilometer trail. But then it was probably one of the hardest races I've ever done, but also one of the most humbling experience, because you're in your 20s, you've been always active, you live in the mountains, you're like, I'm gonna finish well. and you see, no offense, but you see a short old lady, a little bit chubby, that just passes you after 10 kilometers. And she's like, oh, come on, lad, you can do it. And she's probably in her 50s, 60s. And you're like, no, that's not how it's supposed to happen. I am active. I am in good condition and everything. You're not going to pass me. And she finishes with an hour or something like this on me. So yeah, that was one of the most humbling experiences. And this is where you learn that, you know, racing and running is a lot about grinding and a lot about preparing as well.
Mm-mm.
So that was my first race. After that, I did it the next year as well. I was way more prepared. I had time to plan. Back then, I wasn't following a precise running plan. My running plan back then was run as much as possible every single day, as fast as possible. That was, you know, my great philosophy about it. I've learned that it wasn't the best way to train and the most sustainable way to train as well. But after that, I switched to road racing because it was easier where I was living to do road races.
Mm.
So I was mostly doing 10 kilometers. And that was it. And then I was living back and forth between France and India. And so when I was in India, I was in Himalayas. And so it was good for mountain training as well.
Wow.
But
So
sorry.
then maybe looping back to your first race experience, was that when you were based in France or when you were based in India?
No, based in France. My first race experience was in France, and my first Spartan / OCR experience, I was based in France as well.
Ah, okay. So then you literally went from that kind of first race experience, you found out that you had qualified for the World Championships, and did you then go?
Yeah, so I was still a Buddhist monk at the time. Sorry, maybe I'm doing a little bit of spoiling here, but I was a Buddhist monk at the time. And so I didn't have much money. So they told me, oh, great, you're qualified for the World Championship. I told them, yeah, it's great, but I don't have the money to go for it. Like, I would have to buy proper shoes. I would have, you know, to fly over there to Tahoe doesn't have the reputation to be the cheapest place to be, you know, all of this. So I was like, thank you very much, but I can't make it. And people slowly started learning that I couldn't go there. And so the village I was living in the mountains in France, as well as the school I was working at in Paris, they all came together. They did a fundraising and to be able to gather enough money to send me to the US to race for the World Championship. So I think Sunday before the race, so a week before the World Championship, they decided to start a fundraising. And in 3 days, I had enough money to fly. And so on Thursday, I was in a plane to the Spartan World Championships.
Wow, that's amazing.
Incredible.
That's such a whirlwind experience.
And I guess, like your monkhood, is that what was splitting your time between India and France at the time?
Exactly, yeah. So at the time, I was half of the year in France, and the other half, I was in India doing some translation course.
Right.
And so how did you find the time to train? Sorry, this is going to be me asking from an ignorant side of things now. How did you split your time with training and your other commitments?
Your like religious duties, right?
Yeah. So when I was in India, I had different schedules, but when I was in India, I was starting my, you know, the translation course and Buddhist practices and all of this around 6:30 in the morning. So I would wake up at 5 in the freezing cold of, you know, the Himalayas, how it can be.
Yeah.
Freezing cold, going outside at 5 a.m. and starting to run in the middle of the forest where, you know, everyone tells you, oh, you need to be careful in the forest. You can meet bears or you can meet wolves and, like, you know, panther and all of these wild animals in the Himalayas. And you're like, oh, great. I barely have a light to run and I can stumble upon a bear. It's a good running training. You know you're gonna run fast if you have a.
Well, that's when you start. That's when you start doing your sprint drills.
Yeah, exactly. It's
What
called
was that
bearing.
noise?
Yeah. So that's how I managed. I was waking up super early, and when I was in France, I was making sure I was still waking up that early, but I was making sure that in the end of the day, I had, you know, an hour and a half to train enough.
Mm.
But back then, my training was mostly run as fast as possible, as hard as possible. So, you know, you can do that for about an hour and a half, and then you drop dead.
Mm.
So, That was my
And
thing.
I mean, it's my understanding as well. So how did like nutrition and fueling come into your training there? So like everyone has a lot of focus on what they take when they're training and the balance of their macros and things. Like I understand that in the temples and things, you guys are eating communally. Is that right? And your food's taken by like prepared by someone else?
Yeah, so when I was living in the monastery, or that was before I started racing. After, when I was in India, I wasn't in the monastery, so I was eating. But as a monk, you're not supposed to eat in the evening, so you stop eating after lunch, and
Right.
then you start eating again the next morning. So that was a good thing for me to train in the morning. So you train in the morning, then you fuel up for until noon, and then after noon you stop eating. So that was my training. But it is said in the monk vows that if you travel more than 12 kilometers every day, in that day, you can actually eat because, you've done something in order to eat.
Right.
So when I was in France, if I was having, for example, very hard sessions, I would eat in the evening, but most of the time I wouldn't. It was just, it's your body get used to it. And I know I know a lot of athletes that, for example, don't eat in the evening. I don't know if you know Chris Davis, that races in Asia as well. I think he doesn't eat at night. Even the night before a race, he doesn't eat.
That's interesting.
Just your body getting used to that.
And that is quite interesting because that ties into, I mean, it's quite trendy now, isn't it? The whole like intermittent fasting. I didn't realize that was kind of a default.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain athletes who follow that protocol as well. And I mean, I think it's always for people to find what works for them. I think there's a somewhat famous story of Miriam as well, who showed up and raced a championship race coming off of the back of quite a long fast and still managed to hit the podiums.
I think when she was coming out of like a 3 or 5 days dry fast, like no water and no food for 3 or 5 days. Wow. And then she went straight into a race in China and managed to, I think she wasn't expecting that many athletes to show up for the elite wave. And so when she saw that there was that many athletes, I think she had like one orange and just started. But it's the same thing when you saw her racing in Iceland, when she was racing for the Ultra World Championship, not in Iceland, in Sweden this year. When she was racing for the Ultra World Championship, people that race for 24 hours, they start eating, like pizzas and chips and really like fatty food and
just to get those calories in, right?
What we consider unhealthy foods. And she was just, nibbling on mangoes and cacao nibs, and you just, wow. And she went for 24 hours just having a slice of orange or a mango, or your body.
Yeah, which I guess comes down so much to what your body is adapted to. And I guess that's what I'd be interested to hear from you is, so you transitioned from life in a monastery to life doing your duties outside of a monastery. Then you decided to leave that portion of your life behind and move on to a more kind of traditional career and training. How has your nutrition changed in that as you've kind of learned more and experienced more races, but also as your lifestyle has changed?
So I've been vegetarian for about 20 years now. I've been vegan for about 6 or 7 years. So I guess I started becoming vegan when I started racing. One doesn't go with the other one. Like it's not because, a lot of people say, oh yeah, since I transitioned to a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, I've seen my performances improve a lot, or all this. I haven't particularly noticed it. I just noticed that I don't feel any deficiency. I don't feel any lack. I don't feel especially tired, or I don't feel, I train between 3 and 4 hours every day and I'm feeling fine. I live in Bali, so it's like 30 degrees every single day. So I shed a lot of weight every day. In the moment I wake up in the morning, and when I finish my morning sessions, I lose about 4 kilos, I think, of water and food.
And I've literally seen this. So me and Lou have worked out together a few times. I stayed in Bali for a while with him, and we finished one and he sat down on a rower, and literally he could have rowed that machine away on the lake that he left behind. that was coming out, it was dry, and then he created that rowing machine's own lake underneath. It was incredible.
Yeah, no, I lose a lot of, water, and I lose a lot of weight after every single training. So I make sure I don't lose too much weight, but that's the only attention I give to my diet. I make sure, I eat healthy and I don't eat junk food all day, but I'm not going to count the macros or count any of this. I know I have enough proteins because, I eat a lot of hummus and lentils and stuff like this, but I don't, if for 2 days I don't eat hummus, I'm not feeling especially weak. Or I think a lot of people are saying that when they transition to a vegan or vegetarian diet, they feel weaker or they feel all of this. But I think it's more of a mental thing than an actual physical thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Jay's kind of same camp from a vegetarian perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been vegetarian for about 10 years now, maybe a little bit longer. But like, one of the most frustrating things is when people are like, dude, where'd you get your protein from? And like, you sort of, it's not a question for me to answer, really. It's like you could throw that back with them with countless other macros and be like, oh, where'd you get your wherever from? And they couldn't answer. But it's actually really surprising when you put it all together. We're natural kind of grazers. We're designed to kind of source from multiple different locations and stuff. Like it's entirely doable.
Yeah, and I mean, you grow some of your own food as well, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying. It's kind of hard in Bali, but when I was living in France, I had a huge garden, and my dad's been taking care of it for a long time. And so the garden is what gives us vegetable most of the year. It's still in the mountains, so when you grow your own carrots, you can keep them for a month. Where the ones you buy in supermarket, they're just they turn to water after a week. But the vegetables you grow are way more packed in nutrients and all of this. But I've had about the missing the proteins and stuff like this. A very funny story the other day. So I was doing strength and conditioning in Bali MMA, the gym I train at right now, and it's people that Australian people, very nice people, but strong guys that eat meats and everything. And the end of the workout was a farmer's carry, and I have a good grip, so I can carry a lot. I can't bench a lot, I can't squat a lot, but I can carry a lot. It's just because it's not something I'm benching and squatting and stuff like this. It's not something I focus on. But so we were doing farmer's carry, and farmer's carry, I can go heavy. And so they were saying, oh, okay, so you can go from 20, 25 kilos on each hand for farmer's carry. And then I want to go for the 25 kilos dumbbells, and there is no more 25 kilos. So what do? I go for the 30 kilos. And I go for the 30 kilos. I pick up 30 kilos, and I do my farmer's carry. And we had to do something like 5 repetitions or whatever. I dropped them, I rest a little bit, and then some guys from the Bali MMA pro team, they picked up my dumbbells, and they walk away with it, training with it. So I'm like, great, now I don't have 30 kilos anymore. What do? I take the 35. So I pick up the 35. I'm carrying 70 kilos, which is more than my body weight. I'm carrying 70 kilos like this. And so some guys from Bali MMA see that, and the next sparring sessions we have, they're like, wow, you're strong and you're vegan. Imagine if you were eating meat. And I'm like, I don't think it works that way. I don't think, I was like, if you look in nature, if you look like at an ox, or if you look at a gorilla, they don't eat meat especially, they eat mostly vegetables, and they seem pretty strong to me. And they were like, yeah, imagine if they were eating meat. And I'm like, oh God. That was so funny because it sounded so genuine. But you're like, I don't think it works that way, but okay.
Oh, I've got just like the strangest picture now of these guys like with an ox trying to like feed it, going like, here, have a steak. Have a steak, it's good.
Have a steak. You're gonna be stronger, bro. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, nutrition. I don't specially pay attention to what I eat. I make sure I eat healthy enough, and I don't turn into a big bowl of fat because I'm eating too much chips or something.
Yeah. Do you find that mid-race nutrition is more difficult to source? Because I know that some gels and stuff are made with gelatin, and other ingredients. Like, what's your sort of mid-race nutrition strategy? Like, do you take gels or do you just hammer through?
So I used to be really bad for that. I used to, even when I was going for my, long runs or stuff like this, I used to not take anything, no water, nothing. Even if I was running for 2 hours, I wouldn't take anything. I was just, power through it. And I've come back from those races, and I've seen, not from those races, but from those runs. And then I've seen my performances like, drop mid-race, being like exhausted and tired and not being able to finish. So I slowly, we learn by failing. So I've slowly learned that, bringing water with yourself is better. Having, a date or some gels with you is better as well, because you fuel. And no, surprisingly enough, a lot of the gels and a lot of the nutritions like that are most of the time vegan and plant-based. Except if you look at, of course, honey stinger or something, they're not vegan, if you consider that honey is not vegan, but they're not vegan. But if, for example, nowadays I only run on Tailwind, that's the only thing I take.
Right.
Whether it's the Tailwind endurance fuel, just because I think you could reach the same result with dates or with something more natural.
Sure.
Even though it's very natural, but not in a powder form. I think you could reach the same result. It's just that it's very practical. You just drop 2 scoops in your bottle of water, and that's it. You're done for 3 hours. You can run on that.
Yeah, makes sense.
And for the recovery, I use the Tailwind recovery, and I don't think it has any magical effect or anything. It's just because the most important time to recover and to rebuild the muscles you've broken down with your training is between, I think, half an hour and an hour after your training. And when you come back from training, starting to cook or starting to prepare something in those 30 to 60 minutes, where the only thing you want to do is either jump in your pool or lie down in your position, that's where it becomes very convenient. You just drop 2 scoops of Tailwind, you just shake it and you drink it, and it tastes good, and that's perfect. So that's, the nutrition, here in Bali, it's also amazing. You can pick up a watermelon and a coconut and just smash kilos of watermelon.
No, incredibly jealous of your access to nice healthy foods out there in Bali. Yeah. The Deliveroo options are very different on your menu to ours.
This is true. And we have developed quite a bad watermelon habit at the moment as well, where we've been going down to the local supermarket and trying to find those.
Honestly, watermelon is one of the, since I moved to Asia and very hot temperature, watermelon and coconut water are the 2 best thing I've found. Like, when you come back from a hard session where you've lost 3 kilos of sweat everywhere, you just would want to do one thing, is just scoop the watermelon. I just slice the watermelon in half and just scoop all of it, and you become so full with just water. But it's
it's kind of like a double win, isn't it? It's like your nutrition and your hydration all wrapped up in one. It's pretty good.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. So we've talked a little bit about your nutrition and your learnings there. You mentioned that your training philosophy has changed quite a lot from when you first started running and were just like hammering every single session. Can you chat to us a little bit about, I guess, your learnings there and what your training philosophy is nowadays?
Okay. So when I started, it was like, running as hard as possible for as long as possible every single day. And then it switched a little bit more to, okay, you need to train smarter. So you need to have, I don't know, something like 3 key sessions a week, and the rest is just going to be easy runs and where you're recovering. So I've switched to that. But for me, in my mind, I was still thinking that if you're not pushing hard, you're not training. If you're not, if at the end of the session your leg is not shaking, then you're not progressing. Maybe it's good for recovery, maybe it's good for that, but you're not progressing. And starting since, I think last year, I started reading, after John Albon's recommendations, I started reading Training for the Uphill Athletes.
Okay.
And they talk a lot about heart rate-based training. And when you read it, it's one of the biggest, eureka moments you have. It's like, oh my God, this is so true. Because we used to think that, I used to think at least, that in order to run faster, you need to run hard and get your body used to running hard. But the fact is, your body can't sustain a high heart rate like this for a very long time. You can be faster, but you're going to be faster for 8 minutes, something like this at best, at a high intensity heart rate. What you want to do is have your easy run faster and not your hard run faster. And that's what I realized. And this is why, you start realizing that, you need to run as much as possible easy runs. And they're going to become easier and easier to go at a faster pace. And that's what you want to do. John Arbon always says that if for the first half of the race he's not smiling, then he's doing something wrong in his race. He's either at a hard pace or something. That guy is also, insanely good. But I think this is it. Your races needs to be harder, need to be easier to go through. And same for training. My training now has evolved, and I do a lot more of easy runs.
Yeah, which actually I think when we first met you, I remember because we were on a bit of a, I guess, traincation, and you would come in and hammer like all of these sessions and just seem to have energy for days, and you would be able to go super hard every single time. So I feel like to an extent, as we've known you, we've kind of lived through seeing your switch from that
definitely.
kind of go hard, go home, like every single session, to transitioning to a more kind of easy, maybe 80-20-ish style of training.
Well, also you were just saying like go hard, go home. We used to watch him run to the gym, do 2 hours at the gym, and then the go home part was the run home. Like, it was just relentless. It just never ended for you.
It's true. I used to do boot camps at Empire every single day. I used to go there and every single day do an hour or an hour and a half of like very high intensity training. And I think it helped me a lot. It's been a very good thing. But I think I was exhausting myself too much. Also,
and you've seen quite good results since you've switched up, right? Like I know you've been tracking quite specifically on different routes what your PBs are, and you see quite positive improvements.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like before I switched to that kind of training, I felt like I was a little bit stuck. When you reach that moment where you're like, I'm never going to get any faster than that.
Yeah, you just reach a plateau.
I don't know what I can do differently to be any faster. Like I'm doing my key sessions, I'm running as fast as I can. And for the past X month, I haven't got any faster. So I don't know what to do. And then I started reading on that heart rate based training.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. And now I see which route I can take and see actual results. Like, I'm still running at the same pace, but my heart rate is way slower. Or I can run at the same pace with a slower heart rate, or even with a faster pace with a slower heart rate. And that's when you realize that it's working.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they first stop picking up running, and especially if you come to it, like you said, if you didn't grow up with an athletics background or any of that sort of stuff, I think people think just run as fast as you can every session. It's definitely where I was. It's definitely where I've seen a lot of my friends back home. Like some of them, there was this whole Red January challenge this year, and it was run 4K every day for a month, and you're just like, because you can see the reasoning there. They're like, I was watching one of my friends with that, and it was 2 weeks in, they were like, this is my slowest yet. Like, what's happening? You're like, you're not recovering. Like, that's what's happening. But it is I think it's a very common curve and learning cycle that people go through. The more they start running, they realize actually at times less running and better quality running actually is what makes the difference there, right? So.
Yeah, and what I think is amazing and what I'm excited to see for you is that it's been quite a recent transition where you've moved to this heart rate based training. So really you probably are still quite far from reaching your athletic potential, yet have had some incredible results since you've been racing. So obviously we were both in Tahoe together last year for the Spartan World Championships. You also had a really good result in London at the OCR World Championships as well, right?
I've reached in both of those races, I've reached the goal I've set for this year. When I go to those races, I don't, everyone says, maybe you're going to win or things like this. And I know I'm probably never going to win those races because there is too much of a difference between the top athletes and me, but I'm going there and I'm going to be, you know, the best I can ever be, the fastest I can be. I'm going there. I'm happy to be, you know, you're racing the world championship. It's like, you're against the best in the world in that discipline. That is probably one of the, I don't want to, you know, brag about this discipline, but it's probably one of the hardest and most diverse discipline you can ever find. And yeah, you're racing against the best in the world. If I come in top 50, I'm more than happy, you know.
Yeah, and what's incredible is that you've also come in very good places in terms of representation for your country as well, right? Like you've never been far off of a podium spot and have been kind of top French person in a few races too, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because living in Indonesia, the French scene doesn't know you at all, like except a few people that travels to Asia or things like this. The rest of the French like crew doesn't know you. But then you arrive at Tahoe, and then it's the World Championships, and then, you know, the French delegation looks at you a little bit like, who's this guy? Like, we don't know him or whatever. Okay, he's going to run elite. And then I managed to finish, I think, second French. And it's like, yeah, you're happy. I was so happy with that result.
It's like, hello.
Which is incredible, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the fantastic thing, though, about OCR is that as it grows, it's becoming such a global community. So you do get to kind of meet people from all over the world to race for your country, but to also, you know, race on behalf of the countries that you live in as well. And it really just becomes a bit of a melting pot of all of these different cultures coming together. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's always really nice. It's always, I've loved that community where you know, meet people. Even in Southeast Asia, we're all racing against each other. And of course, we all want to win. But at the end of the day, we're all going to share training tips. We're all going to share knowledge of how to train better and what nutrition or all of this in order to grow not only as an individual, but also as a group and as a sport. And we all want the other to be the fastest possible. Even if it means getting beaten by the other person, it doesn't matter. And that's I don't think I've seen that in a lot of sports.
I think that's nice, actually, and I think that's really true with how young obstacle course racing is as a sport. That sort of spirit of collaboration and that kind of on the course rivalry, but off the course kind of companionship is actually really, really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, I haven't seen that in many other sports that I've been a part of personally. So it is something that keeps me coming back to OCR racing and keeps me wanting to be a part of this community and stuff. So it's nice.
Even on the course, like I remember it, and it's the World Championships, and you're racing to get the best position possible. But every single time not every single time, but most of the time when someone passes you, he's like, oh, come on, good luck, you can do it. Or when you pass someone, you give him the same encouragement. And I remember passing someone that after the swim in Tahoe, and it was freezing cold, everyone was just, shivering and all of that. And I remember passing a French athlete on the way down, and, you're in there, I'm racing. So you want to, if you can shave a few seconds of your time, that's very precious seconds. But I remember stopping and asking that person if he needed anything, like if he needed some help or anything, because he seemed to be in difficulties. So I said, gels, or do you want anything? And he was like, no, it's fine. But I'm pretty sure like 90% of the athletes that come on that day to race would do the same thing. And that's, you don't find that in a lot of sports. I remember when I was doing trail runs, and I wasn't, it wasn't like the French series, or it wasn't, the World Trail Championship. But I remember taking the start and running and having people, pull you back, or, playing elbows and everything.
Yeah.
Seriously, we're going for 30 kilometers. The 5 seconds you're going to have a head start on me because you pulled me back, it's not going to change anything.
I've heard similar about the starts of some triathlons and Ironmans, that the swim is just animal. Like everyone's just like climbing on top of each other. And I don't know if it's just because of how packed in they are in that initial swim and everyone's trying to take the line, or if people are like actively trying to drown each other. But you know, a lot of triathletes that I've spoken to have said, you know, that is a pretty brutal sort of first minute or so out in the water.
Like not at top levels, because I have a cousin of mine, she used to do triathlon a little bit. And, you know, she was junior, you know, you're 12 years old, you're doing a city-wide competition or something in triathlon. So it's nothing like, there is no prize money, there is no like glory in the title or anything, but people would be pushing and pulling each other. And you're like,
it's madness. It's just not in the spirit, is it? It's like, you know, if you think about like with OCR having an Olympic dream and stuff, you know, the whole Olympic vision is like fairness and community and stuff. It's just
people coming together.
Yeah, it just seems against that whole vibe, doesn't it?
The world top level, if you look at Ryan Atkins, John Albans, and all those guys, they're all friends, they're all sharing training tips, they're all going to train with one another, and that's what's beautiful about this.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it's great.
And so I guess thinking of that and that kind of competition on the field and camaraderie off of it, what are your aspirations for coming races? Obviously knowing that we don't know exactly when those might be happening here, but what are your athletic goals for this year?
This year, I guess, would be qualify. My first goal would be qualify for the World Championships again. So that's a goal. I've went for the World Championship 3 times, and if I could go another time, every single time I had the opportunity to go for the World Championships, it's like, yeah, I'm so happy about it, because you meet the best athlete in the world in that place, and you race against them.
And you've seen yourself chip away and improve year on year as well, right?
Yeah, I've seen myself. It's a very good feeling, because I've seen myself, you know, chip away a few spots every year and every attempt I have at the World Championships. Also in a sport that's growing, so you feel like you're growing, and at the same time in a sport that's growing. So that's a good feeling. And also, if I was chipping those few places, I've got an excuse of saying, oh yeah, but you know, the level is rising year after year.
But actually that just shows how good of a job you're doing, that, you know, the competition is getting steeper year on year and you're still getting better. So yeah, okay, so Worlds, if that goes ahead, in Abu Dhabi. I'm assuming you mean Spartan Worlds rather than OCR Worlds, because that's moved back to the US this year.
Yeah, that moved back to the US, and I was really happy doing it, and it was probably one of the most fun I've had on a course, because, you know, the obstacles are different, and you've got also multiple attempts, which is, I think, a good and a bad thing. For me, it's a good thing, because you can try more things, you can be more adventurous, because you know that you can, you know, if you fail, you just run back to the start of the obstacles and you start again. You don't have those 30 burpees that are a penalty. It's also a bad thing, because I think personally it's a bad thing, because, you know, it means you can be more reckless and play a little bit on your luck. Whereas if you're, you know, being careful and everything, you know, it's just being cautious against, you know, trying new things.
It's definitely got a pro and con, hasn't it? Because we've seen things go down in the OCR world, so people are doing like huge lâchers between bars and stuff, which you rarely, except for Aaron Newell, you rarely see in the Spartan world. But it adds another dynamic, you know, and it has that kind of interest, and that kind of, if you then return, I guess it's finding like, I mean, there was a guy who retried an obstacle for about 4 hours at the World Champs one year, and I mean, like, I think at that point you need to think of a difference. I think personally you need to think of another system, because you're not really racing after 4 hours trying one obstacle, right? But
it's also a good, like, you know, remixing the game and changing everything, because it's also all about calculation. So if you go on a Spartan, you know that if you have a 2-minute lead, if you know you're going to fail that obstacle, then you just touch the obstacle and you go for your burpees, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because you know you have a 2-minute head start. If you're at the OCR World Championships, I've seen a guy, and he was way better runner than I was, but on the last bodyweight obstacle, on the sketch, he was stuck there, and he was stuck there for like half an hour.
Wow.
And he went from 30 place to something like 55 or 60, just because he was struggling on that obstacle. So it's also a huge game changer, and it's part of the game. So I guess it comes with, you know, a lot of pros and cons for both things.
I think I've said it 100 times. I'll keep saying it. I still think toughest have it smashed. I'm not sponsored by them. They owe me nothing. I've just raced their event, and it's just, that's it. Because like you were saying, like having that kind of, you never want the kind of, you just touch and go. It's name is obstacle sport racing, right? So like, but toughest has that, like you said, like having that lane choice, like where then you can take it safe or you can take it risky. There still is a penalty, so you've still got to make that agile mental choice, and there are still consequences, but not as draining, as slow as burpees. So you still keep the kind of high octane approach. Honestly, Lou, go race the toughest and let me know what you think about it, and tell me why I'm right.
Have you done toughest?
They're good. They are good.
I'd love to do one actually. It
Yeah.
seems it's really good, but I've never had the opportunity to race one.
I don't know if they'll make another attempt at moving back into Europe. So I mean, at one point, so I raced when they first came to the UK, but because their name is Toughest and Tough Mudder, who was still operating under their own company at the time, they made a legal challenge because they said the names were too similar. And basically there was a compromise that Toughest would stay in like the Nordic states and Tough Mudder would continue to operate in Europe. I don't know now if Tough Mudder has moved back to Spartan, where Toughest will try and come back into some of those spaces, or how binding that legal opportunities was, or if they're just happy hanging out and not expanding. We'll just have to see what will happen.
The future of OCR is still a little uncertain whilst
100%.
coronavirus.
But yeah, if you ever get an opportunity to go and try one, like, yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. I think it would address what you were saying about that kind of touch and go and taking things too wild and trying it on your luck. I think it kind of just shaves some of the luck out of it a little bit and makes you make a hard decision one way or the other.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
But now I feel like I have to ask, perfect penalty?
Oh, I don't know. Honestly, penalty would be no penalty. Like, because I think, like, for me, when I go, and that's why I don't train burpees. When I go in a race, I try and go in with, I'm not going to do any burpees. I'm not going to fail any obstacle. And
yeah, I'm actually with you on that, which always seems to be a controversial choice. Like, I'll maybe throw some into the mix in the lead up to a race sometimes, just so that I know that I've got them there and I can do them fast. But I actually don't believe in training lots of burpees, because I'm not, like, I feel like I should be training for what I want my race outcome to be, and I don't want my race to be doing lots of burpees. I want my race to be getting through the obstacles.
Yeah. And also the thing is, I have a decent like body weight agility. And in the 5 years I've ran Spartan races, this year in Tahoe was my first time missing another obstacle than spear throw. Otherwise, I've never ever failed any other obstacle than spear throw. And this year, the monkey double twister was the one that got me, because it might, like, we were out of the lake, my hands were frozen. I'm not trying to find excuses, you know, some people, even with frozen hands, manage to do it. But yeah, I failed that obstacles, and it was my first time doing burpees other than spear throw. So that's why every single time I go in a Spartan race, I'm like, I'm not doing any burpees. Whatever happens, I'm not doing any burpees. And since I got a spear in Bali and a target, I've not failed any spear. So
yeah,
I'm so envious. I want a spear set up.
I know, like, just we haven't quite got the space in our like little condo.
Also, I'm not sure our neighbours would take too well.
No.
Or the government, not sure.
So if we round up today, we'll just do like a little quick fire of just some different OCR questions. Okay, so sandbag or log carry?
Log carry.
Beast or sprint?
Sprint.
Ooh, interesting. I thought you'd have gone the other way.
Hot race or cold race?
Hot race.
Stadium or muddy?
Muddy.
Okay, and then your least favorite obstacle. So not even on the one that you fail the most, just the one you don't enjoy.
I'd say carries.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go. Expand.
They're the one I struggle the most with, because, you know, when you're 65 kilos and you have to carry a 60 kilo sandbag or things like this, they are a real struggle. Yeah.
No, and that makes total sense. I mean, I've always said with me being, I sit around 80 kilos. When I get to Herc hoist, it's a lazy obstacle for me. It's a recovery because I grab the rope and I just fall backwards, and that puts it about halfway up. Whereas, yeah, whereas for if you're 60, you're putting a lot more effort into that. Okay, and then last question: your most confident obstacle, the one that you like always look forward to.
The multi-rig.
Multi-rig. Yeah.
I guess that goes back to what you were saying about having good grip gains.
Yeah, that's like when I see a finish with 4 or 5 bodyweight obstacles, like we have a lot in Asia. Like you have rope climb, and then you have like monkey bars and the multi-rig and everything. I'm like, this is my game changer. I remember racing against Ian on Singapore YCK.
Mm.
And we got on the hair hoist at the same time. I mean, I got on the hair hoist before him, and I was halfway through. He arrived at the hair hoist, and he's way more efficient than I am on the hair hoist. And so we finished at the same time. We raced to the monkey bars, and we raced to the multi rig. And I think I got, I don't know, maybe 2 seconds on him on the multi rig, just because I'm really confident with it, and I'm pretty sure of my grip. And yeah, we finished. Yeah, I remember finishing crossing the finish line and him like sliding in, and you can see on the finish line pictures, you can see he's sprinting just behind me.
It was so close. I remember close. Yeah. And it was wet that day as well, so I mean, like to make gains on monkey bars or a multi-rig, and it was raining heavily that day as well.
We had some thick old mud too.
And so to make race gains on slippy obstacles on a multi-rig, that's pretty impressive. So I can see what that was your favorite.
When the obstacle is wet, it's actually easier, I feel. Like if it's raining, it's going to be easier than if it's a dry and you have your hands wet. Because I don't know, it's a theory I have. There is no scientific evidence on that at all. But it's like, you know how when your hands get wet, they get like all wrinkly, and it's actually to get a better grip on things. If the monkey bars you're gripping is wet, then it's fine. It's wet on wet, it's okay. If your hands are wet, but the monkey bar is dry and dusty, when you're going to put your hand on the monkey bar, it's going to become muddy because, the dust is going to become wet and it's actually becoming muddy. If it's been raining on it for a long time, then it's clean.
That's true. I want to see you maybe do some correspondence, some journalism for us, investigative journalism. I want you to go to the monkey bars at Empire, and I want you to put the hose on one side of them, and I want you to dust up the other side, throw some sand or something on it, and then show me a time trial going through them dry, going through them wet, and we'll crunch the numbers and we'll do a recap. I want to see that. I want you to film that and test your theorem.
We need to, go for an episode of Mythbuster or something like this.
That's exactly what I'm envisioning. That's it.
Lab codes and monkey bar, slow motion and everything. Yeah.
That's what I've got. I've got OCR Mythbusters in my head.
When we are allowed to fly again, we're taking you up on that offer. We will come out and we will do a myth-busting episode.
We'll have to think of some other myths as well. Yeah. Brilliant.
Cool. All right. So, final thing to wrap up. We like to share our favorite workouts of the week with our listeners. So, Lou, what's been your favorite session that you've done so far this week? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, damn. Running workout or any workout?
Any workout. Favorite one. Should I go first while you're thinking about it? Will that help?
Yeah,
Okay, so my favorite workout of the week is a prospective workout that I've not done yet, but I'm excited about it. It's true. So I've been getting on the Strava routes and doing the explore function because back when I was working from the office, I would use my commute in a very functional way. So a lot of my runs, a lot of my cycles and everything was basically to get me to and from work in the most efficient, or maybe with a little variation, sort of amount of time. Whereas with kind of working from home being the new norm at the moment, I'm now actually going out and doing a workout just for the sake of doing the workout rather than it being my commute. And so I'm slowly exploring the routes around where we live. And I found a new cycling route that I want to try that's going to take me up to the Rifle Range Road side of MacRitchie, for anyone who's in Singapore and knows where it is that we're talking about. Because the hill that then takes you down into the loop from MacRitchie, where it's been less used recently and we've had loads of thunderstorms, it's kind of washed it away, and so it's really nice and technical at the moment. It's like a bit muddy, it's very rocky, and it's quite steep. So I'm excited to take my bike out there, work out how I can get there, how hard that is, and then whether or not I can do hill sprints afterwards. So yeah, I'm very excited about this.
So mine actually is a workout that I've done this week, rather than one that's in the future, you lunatic. But like, similar to you, Lou, and what we were saying to begin with, I used to have a whole, just go out and run hard and run fast and you will get better. I've been sticking really rigidly to my coached plan and running by heart rate. And actually something that I'm seeing now is my hill drills. I used to absolutely loathe. They used to pop up on my calendar and I was like, oh, not hills again. Whereas this week I went out and I had to do like, at the top of each minute, I had to do like 5 squats, sprint up the hill, and then easy jog back down, and then 5 squats at the bottom. It was drizzling just a little bit. So in our usual kind of 32-degree heat here, it was actually nice and cool. And because it was drizzling, there was no one around, and I just got to do some really, really hard uphill sprints. And actually looking at my times, I broke through some sort of pace barriers that I'd been working with in the past. So like that was really nice to see some of those gains come up as well. So that was nice. Good. So that was mine this week, was getting better at running fast uphill. Yeah.
Cool, PB.
Yeah.
Right. Have we given you enough time to think?
I guess my favorite workout is not going to be a workout from this week, but it's every time I go to Singapore, I run with like 2 amazing people that are so quick. So it's Megan and Sue, and every single time I go there, she takes me to Bukit Timah Hill, and we run all the way to the top of Bukit Timah Hill. And living in Bali with absolutely no hills, going to Singapore, having that hill that is kind of steep,
the one hill.
Yeah. Running up the stairs, running in the middle of the jungle and everything, being led by, those super fast 2 ladies. It's an amazing workout. So I love this. My calves hurt for 3 days and it's like, finally I'm doing hills. But yeah, so that was my favorite workout. And I guess favorite workout of the week was 2 days ago after, a hard jiu-jitsu session at Bali MMA. There was a kid that trains there and he's probably like 12 years old. He's really funny, but he's a little bit cocky all the time. Yeah. And so we went on the parking lot and they don't really know I'm a runner. Some of them do know, but some of them don't. And that kid, I don't know why we started about racing. And he's like, oh, I would beat you anytime at racing. I'm like, I'm barefoot right now, wearing sweaty shorts from Bali MMA. I'll race you anytime you want. He's like, okay, let's do it. And so we're on a parking lot and he's like, I'll race you to that car and back. I'm like, fine. And then, yeah, teaching kids a lesson, that's a good workout. Showing them who's the boss for the next couple of years, that's a good workout.
Fantastic.
Fair. Oh, well, you'll be excited to know that Jesse and Sean have just worked out how to set up the full Bukit Timah Hill loop with a segment on Strava. So when you come back to visit next time, then you've got that to try and win as a segment crown as well. So. Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap there.
Well, thanks for joining us, Lou.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
And that concludes this episode of the OCR Review. We hope you enjoyed it and we'd love to hear from you, so please hit us up on our social media channels. You can email us at theocrreview@gmail.com, find us on Instagram at theocrreview, or on Facebook at the OCR Review.
Remember to send us your thoughts, questions and suggestions for future episodes, and please do subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. We've been
Ilona.
Jay,
Sean.
And Jessie.
and this is the OCR Review. Thanks for listening.